briefly go over something that was included in the link to the video that I sent yesterday, whatever day it was. Sorry, different class, never mind. My brain is totally full. Let's back up. So the terms for studying for quizzes, exams, and such, the terms on pages 1077 to 78 and 94 or 97 are the ones in bold print, the ones you need to be familiar with for when we come up to have a quiz or when we have the exam on drama. One comment. I forgot, totally my fault. I forgot to make the quiz visible to you over the weekend, or that was due on Sunday. I sent an email yesterday informing you have, I believe it is until tomorrow night for the quiz. Did I say that? I'll have to no. The quiz is due, I think tomorrow night. The exam will be due Sunday night. So I've given you guys, originally the exam was gonna be Friday night, but I pushed it back since I forgot to make the quiz visible. So the quiz is visible, make sure you take it. Send along email about quiz questions showing up on the exam. Some of them might be the exact same quiz questions, others will be slightly modified. Anything else discussed in class, signed readings can show up too. There will also, on the exam, and I'll mention this again on Thursday, just for everybody knows, there will also show up on the exam, and I said this in the email, passages that we went over at length in class, okay? There'll be significant, important things from the readings, from the assigned readings. There won't be many of them. I don't remember how many there are. 5 or 10, maybe. There might be 1 or 2 of those in the extra credit. There is extra credit. I don't remember how much off the top of my head. The exam either was opened last night or I'm opening it Thursday night for you all because I want to be able to grade your quizzes that are due tomorrow night so that you can have those, you can review your quizzes to go prepare for the exams. Okay, now I gotta get my mind straight because I'm thinking this is my Monday, Wednesday, Friday class. I sent them a video that went over all this stuff we're doing today. Okay, reading drama. So I'm not gonna go over the terms that are in boldface on those 2 things. So jump ahead to, if you have your books, Study of Sophocles. Because this I do want to go over. Sophocles, one of the 3 great Greek dramatists. You got a guy named Aeschylus, Sophocles, he wrote only tragedy. Sophocles, who wrote tragedy, and Euripides, who also wrote tragedy and some comedy. Reason we focus on Sophocles is largely because of Aristotle, who wrote a book called On Poetics, or it's variously translated, The Poetics, in which he analyzes and describes kind of the purpose of drama, all right? In there, he talks about largely tragedy. Tragedy is the highest form of drama, Aristotle said, but he also addresses what are called the 3 unities: time, place, action. Time. Everything within a play occurs within 24 hours. Place, 1 setting. Action, 1 plot, okay? One that is just literally 1 plot. There aren't subplots, there aren't little side things. When we get to Shakespeare, Shakespeare's going to take this notion of the three unities and throw it out the window. All right? Pretty much all three of these guys follow this. One interesting thing about them is Aeschylus is the first one to introduce two characters in a play. I mean, plays are new, very new at this time. Aeschylus follows, and I can't remember the first writer of drama, but it's essentially a monologue. One person stand up talking. Aeschylus introduces a second character. Sophocles introduces a third, okay? Other than the chorus. Chorus doesn't count here. And then Euripides doesn't really add anymore, he just expands certain things. So, look at beginning the study of Sophocles at pages 1120 and following. You've got some biographical background about him. He won all kinds of awards. He was a major civil military leader for the town of Athens during what are called the Peloponnesian Wars, general, all this kind of stuff. Okay. The way drama first arose is it arose as part of a religious ceremony, or take that back, a religious festival. Festival to Dionysius, the god of partying, essentially. Okay? And when it began, by the time Sophocles comes around, his dates are 496 to around 406 BC. So this is the 5th century BC. By the time Sophocles comes around, you have in these festivals competitions for best playwright, best tragic author. He wins his first award in, I don't have it written down, in 468. He's 26 years old, 28 years old, something like that. Aeschylus had been winning it prior to him. He and Aeschylus were the two finalists. He beats Aeschylus. Okay, this would be like some young actor today dethroning, the current, whoever the greatest actor is, kind of a thing. All right. He then goes on to win it multiple other times. He writes a whole bunch of plays. If I remember correctly, and I don't think your introduction, yeah, it does. On page 1120, he wrote over 120 plays. Only 7 of those survive. Okay? That may not be quite accurate. Only 7 of those survive that we know of. And the reason I throw in this, just going to throw out something kind of real new, cutting news, so to speak. When Mount Vesuvius erupted back in whatever year it was and destroyed Pompeii, Italy, it destroyed also a town nearby named Herculaneum. Okay, Herculaneum, in one sense, is a greater archaeological site than Pompeii, because at Herculaneum, this huge Roman villa was discovered, perfectly encased in the ash of Pompeii. At Herculaneum, at this villa, the villa belonged to Julius Caesar's father-in-law. Okay? At Herculaneum, a library was discovered. We know from what has been recovered so far that the library had several hundred, possibly several thousand, some estimates are tens of thousands, of papyrus scrolls. So papyrus, plant-like matter with material written on it, rolled up like this. Those became perfectly, in one sense, preserved. They still are like this. The only problem is now they're charcoal. You can't go and unroll them. You handle them and they fall apart. Well, beginning about, close to 30 years ago, back when I was involved in some textual stuff, conference in New York, There was a guy there speaking from Cambridge University, I think it was, and they had started doing back in the 90s stuff with specialized cameras, lighting, mass spectrography, and such. And we're starting the techniques, the ability to take like MRI or CAT scan images of those lumps of charcoal and break them down so they're still all rolled up like this, but to be able to break them down to like one side all rolled up and be able to tell the difference between what was on this side and what was on this side. And to be able to start to read the text on each side. Okay? Now, I said this was Julius Caesar's father-in-law's estate. Julius Caesar died in 44 BC. So everything that was there probably before Caesar's death. In other words, these are old manuscripts. They're not manuscripts literally because they're on papyrus. It's thought by some scholars that it's very possible that among all of those papyrus scrolls there are lost works of Sophocles, Aeschylus, Euripides, other people who we only know they wrote because others refer to them. That is, other authors who nothing survives of. Article just out today in Nature today or yesterday, in Nature magazine about some guy during COVID. He's got an AI company that he started up because he had nothing else to do during COVID, couldn't go off. He stayed up late at night, started learning about Roman culture, discovered about these papyrus manuscripts and such, and he has started a project, and he's got others working on board with him, and they've already started to decipher some of these things that have never been deciphered. So the next several years, we may discover a lot more of, for example, Sophocles' works, a lot more of Aristotle's, Plato's, etc. Okay? Just adds to Western knowledge. Okay. Mentioned Sophocles was a civic leader. He was a military leader. He led battles. He conducted battles, all that kind of stuff. He's known primarily for these three works. We do have 7 of his plays intact, but these are the 3 he's primarily known for. This is the order in which they were probably written because it is the order in which they were first performed. We don't know the exact dates of composition. But the play Antigone, which is the next one we will read, after the one starting today, was first performed around 442 BC. All right? The play Oedipus the King, the one we'll start today, was performed sometime around between the years from 429 to 420. Your book gives a date of 430, okay? But your book is a little out of date also. So sometime between that 9-year span, it was first performed. The final play, Oedipus at Colonus, was performed 5 years after Sophocles' death, okay? That's the order of performance. This is the order of how the plays occur within chronological time. Oedipus the King is the first play. Antigone is the second play. Why? Antigone is one of Oedipus' daughters, or Oedipus if you want to use the British pronunciation. This is the third play. This is the play where Oedipus dies. His other children are, except for one, are dead by that point. Okay? One daughter survives and is the one who is leading him at this point. It's from Oedipus, as I suggested the other day, that we get what Sigmund Freud called the Oedipal complex, or the Oedipus complex. It's from another play by Sophocles called Electra that we get what's called the Electra complex, and we'll talk about those when we get to that point within the play. If you have your book in front of you, on page 1123, you have a photo of the classical Greek theater in Delphi, Greece. Okay? you've got this big round area. You've got a stage, which is raised above that area. And at the back of the stage, you have this big building. So, round area here, seating that goes like this, which rises out. Stage here, building back here. The building is called the skein. This is the stage, okay? This is the orchestra. This is obviously the seating, all right? The skein, or skeiny, S-K-E-N-E, that's where people put on their costumes and come in and out. Bear in mind, in ancient Greek theater, Sophocles, for example, actors don't come out looking like this. They come out with masks. They've got these big masks on. The masks help, what's the word I want? Amplify their voices. Why? If you look at that theater, those back rows, or back seats in that amphitheater, that's a long distance. These things were designed so that actors don't have to yell. They've got great acoustics. In some of the theaters, some of the ancient theaters, have been reconstructed, and they put on all these ancient Greek plays during the summer, and they're packed. Some of these things could hold 10, 15,000 people. I mean, this is how popular they were, okay? Orchestra, that's where the chorus within a play does its bit. Chorus does not mean like a choir, okay? Chorus is a group of men. Originally it was 12. Sophocles, I think it's Sophocles, bumped it up to 12 to 15. And within the movement of a play, the chorus will largely kind of wander from one side slowly, reciting their lines, and then they'll stop and they'll move across the other side. When they make that one movement, that's called the strophe. When they turn around and go back the other direction, that's called the antistrophe. Those are terms that are discussed in these pages, okay? Among others. 1122, 1123, you've got orchestra mentioned, you got Scani. Deus ex machina. Deus ex machina, literally, phrase means God from the machine. Aristotle, when he talks in the On Poetics about the Deus ex machina, he ridicules it. Because what it means is, you've written a play that you cannot resolve the central problem or conflict. So what do? You have a God come in and rescue everybody. This idea still exists, kind of, up to today. It's pretty much, should I go there? Yeah, it fits with pretty much all the superhero films. I mean, what is Iron Man but a god? What is Thor is a god? You know, all the others, okay? Even go back to the 1930s and 1940s, cowboy and Indian films. What was the Deus ex machina? The settlers are all about to be slaughtered by the Indians, and what do you hear? You hear a bugle, and the cavalry comes in, okay? It's that kind of thing. We don't see that in these two plays at all. Okay? We won't be reading Oedipus at Colonus. Oedipus at Colonus, we see Oedipus finally die. He's lived a sorry, sad, horrific life, and then he dies. But there is a Deus ex machina moment. When he dies, the gods feel such pity on Oedipus, they make him into a god. It's called, I don't think your book mentions this, apotheosis, okay? But again, Aristotle really poo-poos that notion. You don't really see it much in Aeschylus. Euripides does, but Euripides uses it not as a crutch. He uses it kind of as the focus, and we won't talk about anything else about his plays. Okay, keep going on. Couple things about some of the terms on 1124 and 1125 talking about Oedipus, Sophocles. So on 1124, you've got the division of a Greek tragedy. Know those 5 parts, okay? Only the first one of which is in bold on 1124. The others are in italics. Prologue, Parados, Episodia, Stasimon, Exodus, okay? But tragedy, we need to talk about tragedy a bit. What's a tragedy? Tragedy gets used all the time today. How's it used? What kind of event's a tragedy? Okay, it leads to sadness. I mean, what? Give me an example of an event that somebody would say, man, what a tragedy. 9/11? Okay. Natural disaster, earthquake, tsunami, etc. Not at all what is meant by tragedy in the ancient Greek sense. A tragedy in the ancient Greek sense has to do with our actions. Okay? Somebody shooting somebody. Well, the person being shot, it's a tragedy for them. And the ancient Greeks would say, guess what? It's also a tragedy for the person doing the shooting because of the repercussions that will come. Okay? And you get at the bottom of 1124 and the top of 1125 this statement. A literary tragedy presents courageous individuals who confront powerful forces within or outside themselves with a dignity that reveals the breadth and depth of the human spirit in the face of failure, defeat, and even death. Okay, kind of long-winded, kind of wordy, but what does it really mean? According to that definition, you could say that barn burning is a tragedy. Why? Because it forces Sardi to do what? Confront powerful forces within or without. There's 2 of them. They're tied to one person. The powerful forces within, the old fierce pull of blood. The powerful force without, daddy. Okay? Confronting that with a dignity that reveals the breadth and depth of the human spirit. I mean, he's got to go against his father. He's got to go against his family. That helps reveal that, okay? Here's another definition. I think this is a better definition than what Michael Meyer gives you. And there are a lot of definitions. This is his definition, all right? I think you have a tragedy when a person is forced to act, okay, without having all the necessary information upon which to make a decision. Now, I don't mean forced outside, forced internally. Has to make a decision, and because a decision is always what leads to an action, and then has to act on that decision, but doesn't have the information that he or she needs in order to make that decision. So they're kind of going off half-cocked, all right? And you'll see how that works with the play Oedipus the King and with Antigone. Because when we get to, usually in a tragedy, if the play is named after a person, that person is the tragic hero. That person is the protagonist, the one we are meant to identify with, but not always. I can't use that. I was going to make a comment about our quiz on good man is hard to find, but I can't, because I'll possibly give away an answer. Oedipus the King. Oedipus is the tragic hero. He's the one put into a situation. He doesn't know all the information he needs and makes a decision, and the ramifications and consequences flow from that. Okay? I'm going to throw this out there. It's a question. In the play Antigone, when we get to it, who's the tragic hero? Who's the protagonist? Now, I just said, usually it's the person the play is named after, but not always. Okay? So, why does the tragic hero suffer, or protagonist? I'm going to use the term protagonist. I like that better than tragic hero. Why does the protagonist usually suffer? According to Aristotle, page 1125, the protagonist has some, to quote your book, error or frailty that brings about his or her misfortune. Now, that often gets described, your book uses the term tragic flaw. It's also translated, where did I get free? It's also translated as fatal flaw. But both those terms, tragic flaw and fatal flaw, imply that this error or frailty is some aspect of the character. It's some aspect of the person's internal makeup. Okay? That's not necessarily the case. That's not necessarily what Aristotle means by it. Okay? And notice in the middle of that paragraph where it's talking about Aristotle and this kind of thing, the weakness, the term for this weakness, your editor says, that Aristotle uses is Hamartia. That's pronounced amartia. The H is silent. Okay? This is the same word writers of the New Testament use to describe a flaw, a problem in every person. When the writers of the New Testament use that word amartia, when the New Testament, several hundred years later, gets translated into English, over 1,000 years later, that word gets translated as sin. Okay? Sin. We all think we know what the word sin means because it's based upon translations. The word amartia is an archery word, like bow and arrow. It means one thing. If you pull out a bow and arrow, you go to an archery range, or you go to a pistol shooting range and you pull out your pistol, whatever, and you've got your target, and let's say the target isn't a human, but it's circles followed by circles. What's at the center of that? Bullseye. Amartia means you missed the mark. That's what sin means. You missed the mark, meaning you missed what you were aiming at. If you were aiming at the bullseye and you hit one of the 20s outside, it means you missed. Notice what that does not imply. It doesn't imply that it's because of some inherent inner fault. It just means you effed up. You tried and failed. Okay? See, it's because of that that I think my definition is a lot better than this one. You try, but on the basis of what? Incomplete information. Notice, next paragraph. Sometimes, however, misfortunes are the result not of a character flaw, but of misunderstood events. Okay? Amartia has also been interpreted to mean wrong act. Notice, not a personal failure. So, go on. Editor goes on and talks about a couple other terms, mentions catharsis. That's what the tragic play was supposed to do. Every one of you has experienced this. You've seen some movie, and the movie builds up the suspense, it builds up the tension, and when it's released, you kind of go, ah. You know, when the bad guy finally gets, or girl, finally gets their comeuppance. You get that release of endorphins. It makes you feel better. That's catharsis. It's cathartic. It's a purging of these emotions, essentially. Okay? So you have other terms on 1126. Just make sure you're familiar with those. One that I am going to point out to. Dramatic irony or tragic irony. It's really important because really every playwright after Sophocles, they employ it. In fact, not just playwrights. We saw a lot of dramatic irony and tragic irony in A Good Man is Hard to Find. When the grandmother says at the beginning, I couldn't live with my conscience if I thought I took my family to where that misfit might be. That's dramatic irony. It is entirely because of her that they are where the misfit is. Okay? So, Oedipus the King, 1127 and followed. Sophocles did not invent the story of Oedipus. Oedipus was a myth that probably went back by the time Sophocles is writing this version in the mid-5th century. It was probably, came from before 1000 BC. Just like the Homeric stories, the Iliad and the Odyssey, King Agamemnon, long, long before. They had entered, if they ever truly existed, and it is thought there was a real King Agamemnon, they entered into the mythic realm several hundred years before Sophocles starts writing this version, okay? But everybody who attended the opening of this play, let's say sometime in those years, they would be familiar with the play. So you're at a disadvantage unless you'd already heard or read or studied this play in a previous class. Sophocles' audience knew the general story front and back. So, in case you haven't read it, I'm going to give you the general story. There are two people, King of Thebes and his wife. The King of Thebes' name is Laius. Okay, it's in your book. His wife is named Jocasta. The J is pronounced like a Y. Okay, she's pregnant with his child, and someone brings a prophecy to them. And the prophecy says, the child that is in your womb is going to kill you, Laius, and marry you, Jocasta, and you're going to have children by your son who are going to be his brothers and sisters. They say, no, thank you. Okay? So when the child is born, they don't abort. When the child is born, they send the child by the hands of another person to be left on a mountain. This practice, by the way, still happens today. Not in Greece, largely in India, parts of China. Okay? Leave the child on the mountain to die by the natural elements and wild animals. Child, however, gets picked up, taken to another town, and he's raised by the king and queen of that town, state, called Corinth. It's the Corinth of the letters to the Corinthians in the New Testament. So he's raised as their own child. They're throwing a party, and a drunk stands up and says to this child, whose name is Oedipus, or Oedipus. Oedipus or Oedipus means club-footed, because both feet are swollen. And they're swollen because of something that happened to him when he was a baby. And the drunk says, you're a bastard. And he doesn't just mean that in the colloquial, you're a rotten person, you dirty rotten bastard. He means literal. You are not the son of your father. Well, Oedipus doesn't like hearing that. He goes to his parents afterwards. They say, don't worry, the guy's a drunk. But it eats away at him. So he goes to Delphi, you know, that big amphitheater in that one picture, that's at Delphi. He goes to the oracle at Delphi. You can go there today, and inscribed on a stone out in front, in obviously ancient Greek, was the phrase, know thyself. know who you are. Okay? He goes to the oracle and he inquires, what can you tell me about this? I'm a bastard that this guy said. And the oracle speaks the words of the god, and the god says, you are fated to kill your father, sleep with your mother, and bring to the light of the world a brood that should never see the light of day. Put yourself in Oedipus's shoes. What do? You say, well, that sucks. I think I'll go tell mom and dad. Or what Oedipus does. He doesn't want to kill his father. He really doesn't want to sleep with his mother, notwithstanding everything Sigmund Freud will say later on. He runs away from home. Get as far away from them and never see them again. Why? Problem solved. And we have the central conflict of the play right there. The conflict is not between Oedipus and somebody else. It's between Oedipus and fate. Fate. Can you escape fate? He thinks he could do an end run around fate. Okay? So he runs away from home. When he runs away from home, he comes across a crossroads. He's going this way, there's a road going this way, and there's a man on a wagon with some armed guards coming on the same road. They meet at the crossroads. Move, you move. And what do you have happen? Two testosterone-filled men, one young, one older. They fight. One lives. One of the other man's men escapes and runs away. Okay? Oedipus keeps going down the road he's on, and it leads him straight to the city of Thebes. Outside of Thebes, there's a monster guarding the front gates. Anybody know what it is? The Sphinx. Like the Sphinx out on the plains of Giza outside Cairo, head of a man, body of a lion. Well, the Sphinx showed up shortly after that man, who was killed by Oedipus, left Thebes. And the Sphinx now demands tribute from the people of Thebes. Give me a person every day to eat, or somebody tries to solve my riddle. The riddle of the Sphinx is, what goes on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, 3 legs at night? And they send people out, and they can't answer it, and the Sphinx gobbles them up. Oedipus goes, the Sphinx asks him a question, because it's not going to let him in, and he goes, well, that's easy. And he tells him, a man. Baby goes on 4, an adult walks on 2, and when you're old, you walk with a cane, 3 legs. Sphinx disappears. Oedipus is welcomed into the town as a conquering hero. That town is Thebes. Its king is missing. Dead, actually, because the guy who escaped told them the king is dead. The queen is now given to the conquering hero, and that's Oedipus's mother. So, in trying to run away from his problems, away from his parents, he ran smack dab into them, killed his father, and now he marries his mother, not knowing that it's her, sleeps with her, and has a whole bunch of kids. Okay? The audience totally knows all that. They're fully aware. What they want to do, what they want to see is, what is Sophocles going to do with this? How is he going to rework this? Okay? Here's an example of why someone would read something like that. How many of you have seen, none of you are old enough now, if you're like my eldest daughter's age, you remember when The Lion King first came out. All of you have heard Lion King. What is Lion King a retelling of? Anybody know? It's Shakespeare's Hamlet. Entirely. You have a king whose brother kills him. Why? To get the brother's wife. The son, whose position as king is taken by the brother, now has to avenge the father's death, even to the point where you have the father's ghost, Mufasa, in the sky, comes and says, Know thyself. Remember who you are. By the way, it's because of this that Socrates, another Greek poet, went around asking people all kinds of questions. Or philosopher, not poet. Because the oracle at Delphi told him, you're the wisest man in the world. He said, get out of here. Can't be true. So he walked around asking people questions. Those become what are called the dialogues of Socrates that Plato gives us. All he's doing is trying to find people who are smarter than he is. And what he finds out is everybody's a damn fool. Why? Because everybody he meets thinks they're smarter than everybody else. Whereas Socrates knows, I'm a damn fool. I don't know anything. That's why he's the wisest man, his humility. Okay? So when the play opens, all that stuff that I just talked about, that has already occurred in the past. We don't know when the play opens how many years have passed. But we do know it's a number of years, because by the time we get to the end of the play, we're going to find out Oedipus' sons they've left home. He has several sons. His two daughters, who are younger, they're still home, and we're going to see them at the end of the play. The second play, Antigone, is about one of those daughters. The third play, Oedipus at Colonus, the other one of those daughters, is the one who's kind of leading him by the hand. Okay? So, play opens. Got Oedipus. We're going to see his wife. We're going to see his, let me rephrase that. We're going to see his wife / mother. We're going to see his, this is where it gets weird, uncle / is it still uncle? It's something weird. And then others. Okay? Here's the scene. In front of the palace of Oedipus at Thebes. So, the stage is this open ground, and the skene, that represents the palace. Now remember, according to Aristotle's three unities, and Aristotle got this from his analysis of these plays, all of the action of the play occurs within 24 hours. So from the opening moment to the last line of the play, that's all occurred within one day. Okay? It's all occurred at one place, out in front of the palace. And it all occurs in one plot. The entire plot is to figure out who's the murderer of Laius and exact the revenge upon him. Okay? So, there are people, there's a priest standing with a crowd of children. Oedipus emerges from the central door of the skene. Children, young sons, daughters of old Cadmus. Sorry, let me use this one because this is the one I said to use. Oh, my children, the new blood of ancient Thebes, why are you here? Huddling at my altar, praying before me, your branches wound in wool. Our city reeks with the smoke of burning incense, rings with cries for the healer, and wailing for the dead. I thought it wrong, my children, to hear the truth from others, messengers. Here I am myself. You all know me. The world knows my fame. I am Oedipus. What does that sound like? Is this like what I just said about Socrates? Is this a humble person? No. Who says, I am? You say, hi, my name's. No, he kind of objectifies, okay? Why? He's got good reason to. He solved the riddle of the Sphinx. Nobody else could do that, okay? But notice what else he said. Praying at my altars. Now, that can be misconstrued. That can sound like an altar to him. Not an altar he has to pray to the gods. Term that was mentioned that we didn't talk about. Hubris. Okay? What's hubris? pride. What kind of pride? You can take pride in all kinds of things. You can take pride in being a good athlete. You can take pride in being a good student. You can take pride in dancing, music, whatever. That's not hubris. Hubris is take pride and amp it up on steroids to where you're not good at something, you're the GOAT. You're the greatest of all time. Okay? Muhammad Ali, back in the day, he had hubris, and he used it. He used it to taunt his opponents, to play with their minds. Okay? Oedipus does have hubris. And here's the kicker. In all of these ancient Greek tragedies, anybody who has hubris, the gods are going to take you out. They're going to knock you down. Why? Because only the gods can have hubris. Only the gods can be the greatest of all time. Why? Because there's nobody higher than them. So he delivers these lines, and he helps a priest up. He says, speak up. Your years, your dignity, you should speak for the others. Why are you here? Why are you praying here? What's the problem? Some sudden fear, some strong desire? You can trust me. I am ready to help. I'll do anything. I would be blind to misery not to pity my people kneeling at my feet. What has he essentially just said to this priest and these children? Why are you praying to the gods? I can solve your problems. We just had, today's what? Today's Tuesday. What happened in LA on Sunday night? Anybody know? It's one of the big awards, because this is award season for celebrities. Most normal people don't give a rat's you know what about those. The Grammys, okay? I think the greatest thing about the Grammys, I've only watched one clip, was when Tracy Chapman came out and performed with Luke Combs. I remember when Tracy Chapman first came out in 1988. Fast Car was one of my wife and I's favorite songs. Listen to it. Watch the video. Okay? What do the stars do when they go into the auditorium? Let me rephrase that. What do they walk on? A red carpet. Whether it's musicians for the Grammys, musicians for Country Music Awards, actors for Oscars or BAFTAs, Golden Globe, there's a red. Why is the carpet not blue? Why isn't it green? Why isn't it yellow? Why not follow the yellow brick road? And, it's red. It goes back to ancient Greece. The red carpet was something literally you rolled out for the gods. Only the gods could walk on a red carpet. Okay? One of the plays by Aeschylus, mix them up there. One of the plays by Aeschylus, he writes a trilogy of plays about the character Agamemnon from Homer's Iliad and the Odyssey, and his son and daughter and some things that happened as a result. Okay? The character Agamemnon had to go off and fight the Trojan War, but he couldn't get a fair wind in order to get out of port. The sails wouldn't do anything. And an oracle tells him, you have to sacrifice your daughter. You have to sacrifice your daughter, and then Poseidon will give you a wind. And he's like, no, man, that sucks. And his wife really doesn't want him to do that either. No, they can't sail. He sacrifices his daughter. It's a tide of a play. Iphigenia et Aulis, okay? He's off fighting the Trojan War for 10 years. Meanwhile, his wife's back at home plotting because he killed her daughter. He comes back, and she has plotted with her lover, his nephew, to kill him. He arrives, he's getting out of his chariot, and there's the red carpet that leads straight from the block up to the chariot to the palace. And he's like, no, I'm not doing that. I am not stepping on that red carpet. You know what the gods. She said, don't worry about it. You're this victor. You conquered the world. You defeated the. Come on. Just a little red carpet. Y'all know it doesn't mean anything. Within the context of the play, he steps foot on that carpet and you could sign his death certificate then. Why? Ultimately, he angers the gods. Because stepping on that red carpet, it's like saying, I am a god. Okay? So, the priest tells Oedipus, O Oedipus, king of the land, our greatest power. See, it's a little over the top. Who's their greatest power? Apollo? Zeus? You could just start naming off the gods, starting from the highest, Zeus, and going down the list till you get the little, plant and vegetation gods. You see us before you now, men of all ages, clinging to your altars. Here are boys, still too weak to fly from the nest. Here the old, bow down, blah, blah, blah. Okay? We're all gathered here now. Why? Because of the ashes of the town. Our city, look around, you see with your own eyes, our ship pitches wildly. Notice the metaphor he uses to describe the state. It's a ship, not in harbor, but tossing wildly in the sea. We need somebody, we need a pilot to calm the waters. Pitches wildly, cannot lift her head from the depths, the red waves of death. Thebes is dying. And the priest goes on and tells us, the audience, what is wrong. Crops are dying, babies are dying, animals are dying. Okay? Priests aren't able to divine or to foretell the will of the gods. Their means of augury and finding out what the gods want, the gods are silent. Okay? So, line 46. He's referred to, you solved the riddle of the Sphinx. That's why we're here. We taught you nothing. No skill, no extra knowledge. Still you triumphed. A God was with you. So they say, and we believe it. You lifted up our lives. So now, again, Oedipus King, we bend to you your power. We implore you. We're all of us here on our knees. That's a mark of obeisance. It's a mark of reverence. Find us strength, rescue. Maybe you've heard the voice of a God. Maybe you know what the problem is. Act now, we beg you. Best of men, raise up our city. Act, defend yourself. Just a little inkling, or the beginnings of some dramatic irony there. Defend yourself, your former glory. Your country calls you savior now, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So, Oedipus replies, my children, I pity you. How can I fail to see what's going on? I know you're sick to death, but none of you are as sick as I am. There's dramatic irony. He doesn't know how sick he is. The audience out here, they hear that and they're like, oh, damn. Ooh, he doesn't know what he just said. The characters here on the stage, they don't have a clue within the world of the play that they're performing. Your pain strikes each of you alone, each in the confines of himself, no other. But my spirit grieves for the city, for myself and all of you. I wasn't asleep. He goes, you haven't told me anything I don't know. He says, as soon as I realized the city was suffering, I acted at once. I sent Creon, my wife's own brother. That's what it was. Brother-in-law and uncle, okay? To Delphi, to this place, to find out what we need to do. And he says, today he's supposed to be back. When I count the days gone by, what's he doing? Why are they ... What's he doing? What's being implied? He's a little late. He should be here by now. He says, but once he returns, then I'll know. Then I'll be a traitor if I do not do all that God makes clear. Again, more dramatic irony. And the priest goes, oh, look, here he comes now. Okay? Crayon comes in, and Oedipus says, what message from the gods? Put this in a modern context. So say we don't have Crayon, King of Thebes. Say we, I'm not going to use Biden because he's too old and doesn't know what day it is. Say we have, let's use a president none of you remember. Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter's standing there at the White House. And his Crayon comes in. I'm not picking out Jimmy. It could be Ronald Reagan. It could be Isaac. Pick your president. I just didn't want to use Obama, Trump, Bush, whatever. He says, what's the message? Good news. I tell you even the hardest things to bear, if they should turn out well, all would be well. He says, okay, but what were the God's words? What did the God say? Well, if you want my report in the presence of these people, modern day, that would be like an ambassador returning and say, Mr. President, if you want me to say this out in front of CNN and Fox and MSNBC and 1,000 other reporters, well, I can. What's the implication? We should go inside the West Wing. Close the doors, turn off the recording devices, and then I'll tell you what the God says. In other words, Crayon is showing what? Well, you can pronounce it Creon if you want also. He's showing what? That ambassadors, diplomats are supposed to show or demonstrate. Subtlety, diplomacy. You'll almost never hear, it's one reason why I hate most of them, you'll almost never hear a diplomat, Secretary of State, saying publicly, Mr. President, we ought to bomb the hell out of Iran. That's what we ought to do. We ought to just go nuke them. Why? Because they keep shooting at our ships. Let's teach them a damn lesson. Let's take out Tehran. Because how would that play in the media? John McCain, during his run for the Oval Office against Obama, was caught on a live mic once, singing, kind of, an old Beach Boys song, Barbara Ann. And he replaced the Barbara Ann with Bomb Iran. Bomb, 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 Iran. And that was caught. And the press just had a field day with it. There's all kinds of little things like that. There's others with Reagan, actually one time, doing a mic test. And he said something to the effect of, the B-52s are headed towards Tehran. B-52s only carry one kind of ordnance. Nukes. Okay? And it was caught, and he was like, I'm joking, guys. It's a mic test. It's not. Anyways. So, no, speak out, he says. Speak to us all. I don't have anything to hide. I grieve for these my people far more than I fear for my own life. More dramatic irony. Okay, that's what you want. Here's what Apollo says. Drive the corruption from the land. Don't harbor it any longer past all cure. Don't nurse it in your own soil. Root it out. Is that clear? Is that helpful? Drive the corruption from the land. What's the immediate question? What is it? What's the corruption? Or who's the corruption? Does Oedipus know? Nope. How? How do we cleanse ourselves? What are the rights? What's the source of the trouble? Banish the man or pay back blood with blood. So, whoever the man is and whatever the man has done, banish that person or kill him. Okay? Murder sets the plague storm on whose murder? Notice how the information is slowly drawn out. Whose murder? Whose fate does Apollo bring to light? And then it's like Crayon says, I need to tell you a history lesson. Our leader was once a man named Laius, before you came and put us straight on course. Oedipus. Yeah, I've heard about him. Never saw him myself. And the audience is going, yes, you did. Never saw him myself. Well, he was killed. And Apollo says, pay the killers back. What little important detail was in that line? Killers, not killer. Before he said, banish the man. He didn't say banish the men. Or kill him, not them. Where are they? How are we going to find this trail? I mean, this is a cold case, right? Crayon, here in Thebes. That's where he is. Whatever is sought for can be caught. Whatever is neglected slips away. So, if you seek the killer, you will find him. What's the flip side of that? If you don't find him, what haven't you done? You haven't really looked. Oedipus, where? Where in Thebes? Notice the first place he mentions. In the palace? The fields? Foreign soil? Where did Laius meet? He's not asking where is the man who killed Laius. He's asking where did Laius die? In the palace? Like Agamemnon did. Agamemnon, that I mentioned, he was killed in his bed by his wife and her lover. Okay? In the fields? Where did Laius meet his death? He went to consult an oracle. Okay, you notice a pattern? Maybe what should you not do? Just don't try to consult the oracles. Don't try to figure out the future. Maybe just live each day fat, dumb, and happy, or, skinny, dumb, and happy, just not knowing the future. He went to consult an oracle. He went out and never came home again. Really? Nobody? No messenger? No one to cross-examine? No, all killed but one. Okay, what does that but one mean? One lived. Well, that's someone you can cross-examine. He escaped, terrified. He could tell us nothing clearly. Nothing of what he saw. Well, actually, just one thing. Well, what did he see? He said thieves attacked them. A whole band. Not single-handed. Cut Laius down. A thief, so dared. Thieves. Oedipus hears that and he responds with what? A thief. A single thief. He'd kill a king? No, couldn't be. He had conspirators. That's the thieves. A single person did it, but he had what? He had help. Where? In Thebes. What evidence does Oedipus have to make this kind of assumption? Absolutely none. He's just grasping at straws. Okay? Well, Crayon says, that's what we thought. But with Laius dead, no leader appeared to help us in our troubles. What's Crayon's relationship to Laius? He was brother-in-law. But he's not blood tied. It wasn't up to him to take the throne. It has to be someone from Laius's line. Okay? And Laius didn't have any other sons. So, Oedipus says, trouble, your king was murdered. Royal blood, what stopped you from tracking? And I think there can be both the personal singular and the plural. What stopped you, Crayon, as well as all of you, from tracking down the murderer? The Sphinx. They couldn't go out. You go out that gate, that Sphinx is going to eat you. So they were left inside. Oedipus. Now, let me start over. I'll bring it all to light myself. Apollo is right, and so are you, Crayon. To turn our attention back to the murdered man. Now you have me to fight for you. Just like in the long distant past, they had Oedipus To do what for them? Defeat the Sphinx. Now people can go in and out. You have me to fight for me, to fight for you, you'll see. I am the land's avenger by all rights, and Apollo's champion too. But not to assist some distant kinsman, no. For my own sake, I'll rid us of this corruption. That was more tragic, dramatic irony, by the way. He is going to avenge his distant kinsman. Not so distant, however, it's his own father. Whoever killed the king may decide to kill me too with the same violent hand. By avenging Laius, I defend myself. So he tells the priest to get up and leave. Says, summon the city here before us. The priest rises, tells the children to get up. They all get up and leave, and we have the chorus speak for the first time. Okay, what's the purpose of the chorus? It largely does, well, I was going to say one thing. The one thing kind of has two aspects. It comments on what has just occurred. It kind of interprets for the audience what has just occurred. And in that commenting and interpreting, it can also be foreshadowing what's going to come later. Okay? So you get this long speech by the chorus about looking for healing, waiting for the gods to help, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're going to skip most of that. Oedipus comes back out from his palace, and he speaks to the chorus. 245. They pray, notice when we back up, line 239 and following. They, the chorus, praise to Dionysius. Why? He's the god whose festival is being celebrated that Sophocles writes these plays for. It's the Dionysian festivals. Okay? So the chorus is kind of throwing a metaphorical, tidbit to Dionysius to make him happy. But then Oedipus comes out. You pray to the gods. Let me grant you your prayers. That's like saying, don't bother the gods. I've got this. I can solve the problem. Gods don't like that kind of language. Come, listen to me. Do what the plague demands. You'll find relief and lift your head from the depths. I will speak out now as a stranger to the story, a stranger to the crime. See, this play is just, it's one dramatic irony after another for the most part. He says, if I'd been present then, there would have been no mystery to long hunt without a clue in hand. So he was present then, and that's the reason there is a mystery. So now, counted a native Theban years after the murder. In other words, y'all have kind of naturalized me. You've said I'm like a native-born Theban. Where does he think he's from? That I mentioned in the little intro. The town of Corinth. He's going to find out at the climax of the play, he's not a native-born Corinthian. He is a native-born Theban. So, now counted a native Theban years after the murder. To all of Thebes I make this proclamation. If any of you knows who murdered Laius, the son of Labdacus, I order him to reveal the whole truth to me. Nothing to fear. That is, even if you're the murderer and you have to use language of the Fifth Amendment, incriminate yourself. Don't worry. Let him speak up, and so escape the brunt of the charge. He will suffer no unbearable punishment, nothing worse than exile. I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to torture you. I'm just going to make you leave Thebes. There are plenty of other towns he could go to. Okay? He listens. There's no response. He gives people a bit of time. Let that sink in. Next. Okay, so nobody took me up on that offer. If anyone knows the murderer is a stranger, not someone from Thebes, a man from some alien soil, speak up. I'll give him a handsome reward. So, if you know who the murderer was, a foreigner, oh, you'll be rich. And again, he gives him a pause. So nobody knows that the murderer is a foreigner, and nobody here is the murderer. But if you keep silent, if anyone panicking, trying to shield himself, or friend or kin rejects my offer, then hear what I will do. Where's Oedipus going? What's he implying with that? Somebody here knows something. I've given you two options. I've given you two possibilities. You haven't taken those. Now here's what's going to happen. I order you, every citizen of the state where I hold throne and power, banish this man. If you know who he is, banish him. What does that mean? Don't shelter him. Don't give him a place to stay. Don't speak to him. Never make him partner to your prayers, your victims burned to the gods. Never let the holy water touch his hands. Drive him out, each of you, from every home. He is the plague. That should make pretty clear who it is when all these doors start shutting in this person's face. And nobody gives him food, nobody gives him water, nobody gives him shelter, nobody gives him aid. He is the plague, the heart of our corruption, as Apollo's oracle has just revealed to me. So I honor my obligations. His obligations to whom? To the people. See, the relationship between the king and the people works two ways. The people have obligations to the king has obligations to the people. If either of those get violated or get broken, society's going to have problems. So I honor my obligations. I fight for the God and for the murdered man. Okay, so that's the first part. Second part. Now my curse on the murderer. Whoever he is, a lone man unknown in his crime, or one among many, why, thieves, let that man drag out his life in agony, step by painful step. Notice, what did he call this? This is my curse. Whoever did this, let this happen to him. Okay? Step by painful step, I curse myself as well. Pause. Why the pause? So the audience can probably get their chuckles out. If by any chance he proves to be an intimate of our house, if he's someone who lives in my palace, here at my hearth, not just anybody who lives at the palace, but someone who is close to the king, here at my hearth, with my full knowledge, may the curse I just called down on him strike me. That's probably the bit of the new thing that Sophocles adds to the story. And the audience goes, oh, this is going to be good. He's just done what? He's cursed himself. So now what's the rest of the play? Let's see how that plays out. Let's see how that curse is born by Oedipus. By the way, the comment about living his life in agony, step by painful step, that begins at the end of this play. When Oedipus is banished from Thebes and he walks with the stick because he's blind. And it goes all the way through to the end of Oedipus at Colonus. He has been a wanderer all his life. He's never had hearth and home. Why? Cursed. Not by the gods, by his own words, but the gods enforced the curse. So, those are your orders, he says. Perform them to the last. I command you for my sake, for Apollo's, for this country, blasted root, branch, blah, blah, blah. Even if the God had never urged you on to act, how could you not have acted? How come you didn't try to find this out? What's he doing there? He's blaming them for not having found Laius' murderer before. How long has he been king? I think at least 20 years. His sons are all moved away. How come he never did anything? Is this a little bit of attempt to shift the responsibility and blame? So, he says, 294, but I am the king now. I hold the throne that he held in, possess his bed, just all kinds of imagery, and a wife who shares our seed in more ways than one. Why, our seed might be the same. Children born of the same mother might have created blood bonds between us if his hope of offspring had not met disaster. And the audience at that point is probably going, ew, just think about that for a moment, Oedipus. He says, so I will fight for him as if he were my father. More dramatic irony. And he calls to the gods, my curse on those who disobey these orders, and then he curses the land. Okay? And the leader comes forth and says, I'm not the murderer. I'm not stepping forth to announce it. Apollo pressed it on us. He should name the killer. Apollo gave us this job. Why didn't the oracle tell us who did it? That's why Creon was sent there. And what Sophocles is partly getting at with that little comment is throughout Greek literature, with only a few exceptions, the gods never speak clearly. They never just come right out and say, simple declarative fact. They speak in mysteries. They speak in riddles. They speak in images. And you got to sit there and go, what the hell does that mean? Oedipus, you're right. But to force the gods to act against their will, no man has that power. In other words, I'm not going to ride up to Delphi and go, yo, Apollo, get your ass down here. I'm going to make you tell me, because what's Apollo going to do? Go away, puny human. He's going to treat him like a speck of dust. Okay, so the leader says, another idea. Keep going, Oedipus. Tiresias sees with the eyes of Lord Apollo. So we get introduced to a new character. He goes, I'm one step ahead of you. How do they have this name spelled? T-I-R-K. So, Tiresias is the name of a blind prophet. He's called a seer. Sophocles doesn't invent him. He's another one of these mythic characters. He shows up in the Iliad. He shows up in the underworld with the dead in the Odyssey. He shows up in a bunch of other plays. Okay? Here's the kicker about Tiresias. He was always right. When he prophesied something, it happened. And prophecy doesn't just mean foretelling the future. It's foretelling as in before, and forthtelling, telling the truth. In other words, saying how things really are. Okay? It's not what you get from the media. So a prophet might be able to foretell the future, but a prophet can always tell the quote-unquote God's honest truth right now. So, he says, I'm one step, I've already sent for Tiresias. Tiresias comes in, led by a boy. And the leader says, he'll tell us. Okay? So Oedipus addresses Tiresias. I know we only have about 2 or 3 minutes. Look at the language he uses to describe him. Okay? Tiresias, master of all the mysteries of our life. All you teach and all you dare not tell, signs in the heavens, signs that walk the earth. Blind as you are, you can feel all the more what sickness haunts our city. You are the one shield. You're the one savior we can find. We asked Apollo, he spoke in riddles. Come, speak clearly to us, I beg you, grudge us nothing, etc., etc. We're in your hands. Tiresias. How terrible to see the truth when the truth is only pain to him who sees. You're right. I do see the truth. The truth ain't easy. I'm reminded of the scene, the Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson film, Few Good Men, the trial scene, where Jack Nicholson, a Marine colonel character, yells to Tom Cruise's character, "You can't handle the truth. You can't take knowing what the real truth is." Well, he's wrong. Tiresias, I knew it well, but it put from what? What do you mean? What are you talking about? Let me go home. Just let me go home. He says, "You bear your burdens, I'll bear mine. Just shut up and let me go home." Why? What's the truth he knows? Okay, we'll finish this. Yeah, I think we'll finish the whole thing on Thursday because there's about a lot of stuff by the chorus that we'll skip. So don't forget the quiz. It's due tomorrow night. And then the test that will open, I think, tomorrow or tonight, that's due Sunday night. Like I said, passages. This is all in drama, all in fiction. So there will be some passages from the stories that you need to identify. And I'll probably put up a quiz over the intro to drama stuff. And I don't know, the first couple hundred lines of Oedipus that will also be due probably this weekend. All right.